Welcome to my channel, Delightful Stories. I'll be happy if you subscribe to my channel and like it. Enjoy watching and don't forget to leave your opinion in the comments about the story. Is it possible that the closest person is a traitor? It doesn't happen. It can't be, it shouldn't be. Mary looked out the window, tears streaming down her cheeks. 6 months had passed since the day her mother had brought her to the institution. Mary was 7 years old, and she was childishly naive, waiting for her mother, who had promised to pick her up in a couple of days. But time passed, and her mother didn't come. Maybe something happened to her, that's why she doesn't come. The girl was looking for an excuse. The girls who shared a room with Mary told her right away that her mother wouldn't come again because it was an orphanage, and they didn't bring her here for a couple of days. But she waited and believed. She waited a year, and 3 years later. She waited until the last day, until she left the walls of the orphanage. Mary hoped her mother would come back for her, and only when she left the orphanage did she find out that she was in another city, 150 kilometers away from where she lived. Now everything became clear to her. Her mother was not going to come back for her. She had just abandoned her, and that realization hurt. Only one question troubled the girl. Why? She had been quiet, calm, and obedient. So why had her mother left her in a strange place? What could a little girl have done to disturb her? They had their own apartment. Her mother worked and made good money. They always had enough, so she really wanted to find her mother and ask her that question. And then she decided to do something different. First, get an education, find a good job, and come to her mother in the image of a successful and educated, so that she would feel ashamed and hurt as it hurt a little girl who was betrayed by the closest person. She graduated from high school with honors, and on referral she went to one of the best universities in the city. She dreamed of becoming a designer and made every effort to get a good education. When she graduated, she was invited to a well-known design agency where she had 2 internships, and life took on a completely different direction. Mary had interesting projects which she succeeded in realizing. She lived in her own apartment, which she received from the state, and even made renovations to her own design. She didn't have much in the way of girlfriends. She did get close to one girl at work, Julia, but it was more of a buddy than a friend. But still in the life of a girl, a close person. They met back in the orphanage. The girl was 11 at the time, and he was 13. He came to the orphanage at an age when it is most difficult to get used to other people's surroundings. One day, the older boys surrounded the boy, who kept to himself and didn't want to talk to anyone. Mary saw this picture and came to the aid of the strange boy. "Why, the 5 of you on one? What did he do to you?" Formidable declared the girl. "Get out of here." Immediately the elders reacted, but Mary was not frightened and calmly replied, "If you do not get away from him, I'll call Igor Mikhailovich." The boys turned and ran away. He was the physical education teacher at the orphanage, strict and fair. He never allowed to hurt the younger ones, and everyone knew it. That's why they were so frightened by Mary's words. She came up to, "Hi, are you okay? They didn't hurt you?" carefully asked the girl. "No, thank you." He held out his hand. "My name is Mark, and I'm Mary. You're new here, aren't you?" "Yeah, week. I don't want to stay here. My grandmother's coming to pick me up." "Are you sure?" the girl asked incredulously, knowing that adults' promises are not always kept. "Yes. I live with my grandmother. It's just that she was in the hospital and they put me here. As soon as she gets better, she'll come and get me." "That's good." With a hint of envy, the girl said. "My mom promised me she'd take me too, but I've been waiting for 4 years, and she doesn't come. Maybe something happened to her and she couldn't make it," Mark remarked judiciously. "I don't know. Better that than her just leaving me," she sighed. "I'll be sure to find her when I grow up and ask her." "I don't even remember my mom. She and my dad died in a car accident when I was 2 years old. My grandmother took me in. We don't have anybody else. It's a shame, of course. I never had a daddy either. It was just me and my mom. Then Uncle Dima came along and Mom spent all her time with him. But I didn't resent her. Even if she hadn't paid attention to me 100 times, I would have lived at home. Mary had tears in her eyes. "Why don't we stick together?" Suddenly the boy suggested. "It would be more fun together. Let's do it." Cheerfully she agreed. And from that day on, they were indeed always together, except during school and bedtime. The boy learned to protect both himself and his girlfriend, because many people were jealous of their friendship and tried to quarrel in every way. But the boys defended their relationship, even though it was difficult at times. Mark fought with the boys over her, and she fought with the girls. But eventually they were left alone. Philip intervened. The difficulties began when Mark went to college and left the walls of the orphanage. His grandmother never came back for him because she died in the hospital. The teenager took the event very hard, and if it were not for the girl, no one knows how he would have ever coped with such a situation. The 2 years Mary spent at the orphanage without a friend were probably the most difficult. She didn't want to communicate with anyone. She withdrew into herself and waited impatiently for him to come and visit her. Nark was only allowed to visit her friend on weekends, so the girl lived from Saturday to Saturday to Saturday. As luck would have it, the girl's apartment was next door to her friend's, and they saw each other almost every day. The first time she had a hard time adapting to her new independent life, and he helped her, supported her friend. Then there was college, a new, interesting job. But Mary, despite her busy schedule, always found time for her friend. She even took it upon herself to cook for him. Mark worked for a construction company because he was an architect. It was so amazing. Even in their choice of profession, the young people turned out to be close. Today was Mary's 25th anniversary. In the evening, she and Mark go to her favorite restaurant. It's a good thing it's a day off to get a good night's sleep and take the time to tidy up for dinner, Mary thought as she lay on her bed. She was in a very good mood, though the girl was not very fond of her birthday. Today, for some reason, she was especially happy. Phone rang. "Good afternoon, Mary." An unfamiliar woman's voice rang out. "Hello," Mary answered calmly. She was not afraid of unfamiliar numbers, since she could receive calls from customers at any time. "Aphrodite Cosmetic Salon wishes you a happy anniversary and invites you to the treatments. We will give you a subscription for 1 month. You can use the services of our salon during this period, completely free of charge, regardless of the selected service." Wow! Thank you very much. I didn't know you had that option. The girl was very surprised. She has been a regular customer for 2 years, but had never heard anything like this. This option is only available to our clients, which you are. We look forward to seeing you whenever it's convenient for you. Listen, a super gift. Can I come in today? I need a manicure and a haircut. She thought about it for a while and added, "And evening makeup." Yes, of course, what time would be convenient? Let's make it 3 in the afternoon. That's great. We'll see you there. Have a nice day. What a gift. Great start to the day, thought the happy girl. And then came the calls of congratulations from her colleagues. She could not make it to the bathroom to wash her face and take a shower. The phone did not stop ringing. Julia called, also to wish her a happy birthday. Mary was pleasantly surprised by such attention. The last straw was a call from the CO. "From the bottom of my heart, congratulations on your anniversary. I wish you health, inexhaustible energy, creative success, creative solutions, and great female happiness, as you are one of the best employees of our office. The management in my person has decided to reward you for your excellent work by celebrating your anniversary and rewarding you with a trip to the sea for 1 week. The trip is for 2 people, so you can take someone with you who you wouldn't want to be away from for so long. the director said cryptically. "Thank you so much. I'm speechless. But I don't have a vacation for another 3 months." "Oh, come on. It's no big deal. I'll let you book a week of your vacation. Your flight leaves in 3 days, so you have time to get ready. Have a nice evening." Mary thanked the man again, passed out. Mary had already gone into the bathroom when suddenly the doorbell rang. "If there's any more surprises, I'll faint with happiness." She smiled. A delivery man stood on the doorstep with a huge bouquet of roses. She took the bouquet, which exuded a delicate, pleasant fragrance. In the center of the bouquet there was a small card. Mary took it out and read, "My dear little man, happy holidays. See you tonight." Of course, who else would send me flowers? "Only Mark," Mary said with a smile. She put the roses in a vase and went to the bathroom. After taking a shower and drinking coffee, she decided to choose an outfit for the evening. She moved one rack after another, but she didn't like any of it. Mary got dressed, hailed a cab, and went shopping. Then she visited the salon and got a manicure, hair, and makeup done. All that was left was a change of clothes, and they could go out to celebrate. They arranged to meet at a restaurant. Mary knew her childhood friend well and understood that he was probably preparing a surprise for her, but she couldn't even imagine what kind, despite her creative imagination. She took a cab to the restaurant. She did not know how to drive, and she did not have her own car yet. As she approached the restaurant, she saw a black limousine. Someone must be having a party tonight, too. Hey, I wouldn't mind taking a ride in one, she thought dreamily. She paid the cab driver and confidently walked into the restaurant. All the tables were covered with flowers. Balloons of all colors were painted under the ceiling. All had the words "Happy Birthday" written all over them. Mary looked at this beauty with envy. Once as a child, she too had dreamed of such a celebration. Oh, lucky for someone today, such a large-scale celebration was organized. I should have chosen a different restaurant, or it would have been inconvenient to disturb people. She did not finish her thought because from nowhere a friend appeared in a dark blue suit and with a huge bouquet in his hand. "My dear Marisha," he began solemnly and loudly. "Quiet." "Why so loud?" Mary tried to calm down her friend. "I wish you a happy birthday." Ignoring his remarks, Mark continued. "I want to wish you true happiness as a woman, lots of love, prosperity, and the fulfillment of your most cherished desires. One of them I've already fulfilled. It's all for you." He spread his arms apart, showing that the restaurant belongs to her today. "I remember your childhood dream about balloons, and now it's come true. I'm sorry, it didn't work out before. I wasn't financially possible, but now I can do a lot." Tears were pouring down her cheeks. The birthday girl couldn't control her emotions. "Did you do this for me?" she asked, choking back tears. "Of course, for you. You are my dearest person on earth." "Thank you, my good man. It is the best present ever." Mary hugged him and kissed him unexpectedly on the cheek. "No, it's not a present yet. It's just a decoration for the hall. Let's wait for now. The present will come a little later." "There will be a present." She was surprised. "I'm already very happy." A waiter came over and poured champagne into the glasses. As they sipped their champagne and sat down at a table, Mark stealthily waved, and the waiter came over to them. He had a medium-sized box in his hands, wrapped in festive wrapping with a bow. Mark took the box and held it out to Mary. "It's your present. Please open it now." Mary eagerly, like a child, began to open the gift. A layer of paper was replaced by another layer. She couldn't wait to get her hands on the present. At last she saw the oblong box, the usual way to give chains or bracelet. She looked at her friend and smiled, then opened the box. In it was a beautiful gold bracelet, and on it was a ring. Magua looked at it in surprise. She wanted to ask something, but he worked ahead of her. "My darling, there is no one closer and more dear to me than you. You are the best person in the world. I love you. It's a good thing Mary stayed seated, or she would have fallen in surprise. Do you really want to? I really do. I do. Hooray! She said yes. Mark shouted to the entire restaurant, and immediately the applause of the employees erupted. He picked Mary up in his arms and spun her around the room as the music turned on, and the guys started dancing. Mary was happy. She had always loved him, and if she had thought it was sincere love before, she realized with each passing year that she was wrong, but she was afraid to tell him so. The guy didn't show the kind of signs of attention that guys usually show to girls. That's why she was sure they were just friends and didn't want to ruin it with her confession. The paradox was that the guy thought exactly the same. It seemed to him that the girl treated him exclusively as a friend. And for fear of losing even that friendly intimacy, he hid his feelings. That was exactly what they were talking about now, sitting around the table and laughing out loud at their indecision and stupidity. How much time have we lost? Sadly, Mark stated. Yes. And all because you have to talk, Mary smiled. Let's never hide anything from each other again. Let's. After dinner, when the couple left the restaurant, the black limousine pulled up in front of the restaurant. That's where we're going. Did you order this? For the umpteenth time all day, Mary was surprised. Of course, he put his arm around her waist and led her to the car. They drove around the city for about 2 hours and then drove back to her place. Ahead of them awaited the first and most real night of love, which each had secretly dreamed of for a long time. 3 days later, the boys flew off to the sea. They spent the whole week walking around and enjoying each other. It was as if they had only just met. It seemed as if they had only just met each other. It flew by without saying a week, and on their return home the very next day, they applied for marriage. The wedding was set for September 9, the day of their first meeting at the orphanage, and the date turned out beautiful and memorable. 9.9. Mary was happy. It was probably the first time in her life that she had ever been so genuinely and femininely happy. She was getting ready for the big event in her life. They had very few guests. Someone from work, a neighbor Mary and her husband, and Philip, the only person from the orphanage with whom the boys had kept in touch so far. The wedding was celebrated at their favorite restaurant. The event, though it wasn't large, was fun and heartwarming. After the wedding, she moved in with her husband. The newlyweds decided not to go on a wedding trip yet, but to postpone the trip until next year. Family life was quiet, without quarrels and scandals, with full understanding. Sometimes I thought it didn't work that way, that everything was too good somehow. They didn't even have anything to quarrel about. They knew each other so well. So a year went by. They rented out her apartment and put money aside from their salaries at the same time. They had a dream to open their own design office with the development of projects from scratch, and they took a risk. Mark did the calculations and designs for homes from foundation to roof, and Mary developed design projects for the inside of the house. At first it was difficult, and the lack of clients was frightening, but the guys waited patiently for their time, and waited. A very famous man approached them with a request to redo his parents' dacha. It needed restoration and overhaul. The guys got to work, and a week later their project was approved. All of a sudden it hit the guy. Look, we can do our own projects. We need to find a construction crew that will cooperate with us and then go ahead. What do you think? It's a great idea. Let's give it a shot. While they were looking for qualified builders, word of mouth was already spreading through the city about young, talented guys working for the design bureau of the future. Mark managed to find 2 construction crews of generalists who were ready for permanent cooperation, and the project was off to a good start. They developed projects themselves and brought them to life. Their bureau grew into a fairly good construction company within 6 years. The guys were happy. The only upsetting thing about Mary lately was that she was having trouble getting pregnant. Mark consoled his wife and told her they still had a way to go. Age would allow her to spend a couple more years developing her business, and then she could retire and take care of the birth and upbringing of her children. Mary agreed with her husband, but she really wanted a baby in their family as soon as possible. She even had a checkup to make sure there was nothing wrong with her. The doctor reassured her and said she could have children, and she just had to wait. All in good time. Another year passed, but the situation has not changed, and his wife has begun to seriously worry and persuade her beloved to be examined. Please, for the sake of me and my peace of mind, get tested. But this is nonsense. We can have children, just not the time. Is it difficult for you? She took offense at her husband. It's not hard for me. I just don't understand why you have to make it worse. The doctor told you. Everything in its time. She told me, not you. You haven't been tested. All right, come on. I'll go to your doctor on Wednesday and get everything you want. Mary walked over to her husband and put her arm around his shoulders. Thank you. It really means a lot to me. All right, now you better tell me this. Where are we going to celebrate your birthday? I don't know. I don't really feel like it, to be honest. What do you mean? The guy's surprised. Maybe we should just go somewhere, just for a couple of days. Get some rest, change of scenery. I think I'm tired. It's no wonder. We've been working hard lately, he agreed. I'm tired too, to be honest. Let's celebrate your birthday and go to Finland for a week. We've always wanted to go there. How would you like that? I'd love to. She immediately agreed. The birthday was a few days away, but the newlyweds had no idea what would happen on the eve of the holiday. After work, the girl had to go to the salon to pick up a dress she had previously chosen and ordered from a catalog. Her husband persuaded her to invite the team to a restaurant and to relax and unwind a little, especially since the occasion was a birthday party. The boss in the company was very well liked. She was good-natured, considerate, and fair. Mary walked into her husband's office. Will you be long? I have to pick up my dress in time. Sweetheart, 5 minutes and we're out. I know about the dress. Okay, well, I'll meet you by the car. You got it? Magoo went down to the parking lot. She was in a very good mood. Her lover's tests were fine, and he too could have children. They had even been tested for compatibility, and it was very high. We'll just have to wait a little while, Mary reassured herself. She looked around and waited patiently for her husband. It had been about 15 minutes, and he still wasn't there. The guy had such a problem. He didn't know how to plan and manage his time clearly, and was often late. Though not by much, but by 10 minutes steadily. Even when he made business appointments, he wrote down the time half an hour early so he wouldn't be late. You'll learn to be on time someday, Mary smiled as she spotted her eligible spouse. It's a drawback of mine. I can't help it. Not a critical one, I hope. You're not going to leave me for this, are you? He joked, after which he hugged and kissed his wife. Oh, that's silly. Why would I leave you? Okay, let's go. We're really going to be late for your salon. They made it. Mary tried on the dress and was very happy. The chosen model perfectly emphasized all the advantages of her figure. And though she had put on a few extra pounds lately, the well-chosen style of the dress perfectly concealed it. Happy, she got into the car and put the bag with the dress on the back seat. Listen, let's have dinner somewhere, Mark suggested. Come on, I don't feel like cooking tonight. My wife agreed. You read my mind. Where shall we go? Let's go to an Italian pizzeria. You want pizza so bad? Sure. Mark immediately agreed and drove away from the store. On the way, they discussed future trips they would like to take. Mark had been to Finland once and knew a bit about the local sites. His wife, on the other hand, had only dreamed of visiting this magnificent place for the time being. "You can't imagine how beautiful it is there," said the guy. "You'll like it very much. I've been trying to persuade you to go for a long time, but you refused." "I refused because I had a lot of work to do. You know how it is? And now we can afford this trip, both in terms of time and money." "Oh, I can't wait for this trip. It's going to be very—" A bright light and a hard blow interrupted his words. The guy didn't even realize what had happened. He opened his eyes and saw the hospital walls all around him. Next to him on the bed, there was a 45-year-old man in a cast. "Excuse me, where are we?" Barely heard the dream. "Oh, you're awake," smiled his roommate. "You're in the hospital, My wife. I don't know anything about my wife. Just don't get nervous. The doctor will tell you everything." He reached out and pressed the staff call button. Literally, a minute later, a nurse rushed into the room, and seeing that Mark regained consciousness, she ran out of the room screaming, "He's awake. Get Dmitri Anatolievich." After another couple of minutes, the doctor entered the room and leaned over to the patient. "Do you remember your name?" loudly he asked. "Of course, Mark. And don't shout like that, please. My head hurts terribly. Tell me, where is my wife? What's the matter with her? What's the matter with her? What happened?" "See, you say you remember everything. You were in an accident. Your wife is in the next room. She's alive, don't worry." Mark breathed a sigh of relief, but he didn't like the look in the doctor's eyes. "She is alive. But what about her? Her injury is more serious than yours. The impact was on her side. Can you be more specific? Is she gonna live?" "She will. She will. Don't worry about it. It's just that it's gonna take a long time." "Oh, well, thank God, then it's okay. You get well on your own. I won't let you get up today. Tomorrow you can visit your wife." "Wait, what's the date today?" "April 20th. It's her birthday. Doctor, please let me see her for a moment." The doctor lowered his eyes and turned away. "Is something wrong?" "She's still unconscious. Your visit doesn't make sense, I'm sorry." "Yes, there is. You don't understand. She needs me now more than ever. She'll hear my voice and wake up. We've been together since the orphanage. We've been together since the orphanage. We have no one else but each other. Please let me do it." He almost cried out of desperation. The heart of the nurse who was standing next to the doctor could not stand it. "Dmitri Anatolievich, can I take him in a wheelchair? I promise no more than 5 minutes I will supervise." "What if she really hears him and wakes up?" "Okay, why are you making an animal out of me?" "But only for 5 minutes." The doctor said sternly and walked out. Mark looked gratefully at the nurse. "Thank you so much for your support." "You're welcome. Your spouse is lucky to have a husband. Not everyone would tear up like that. Believe me, I know what I'm talking about. I've seen a lot in my years working here. I love her very much." "I can see that," smiled the nurse. "You rest now, and I'll come and get you in half an hour. I'll be waiting." Mark looked at his neighbor and then out the window and thought, "It's ironic. My parents were killed in an accident, and I was in an accident, but at least I'm alive. More importantly, she's alive." When the nurse arrived, Mark was already sitting on the edge of the bed. "How quick you are." She was amazed. "By the way, you have a severe concussion and a knee injury." Only after these words did the patient pay attention to his leg. It was tightly bandaged. He moved into the wheelchair, and they left the room. Mary's room was one door down. His nurse opened the door and wheeled the stroller into the room. No one was there except Mary. They drove closer, and Mark could see his wife. A huge bruise on her cheek and shoulder. An arm in a cast, tubes sticking out of her mouth. It's a gruesome picture, especially when you're looking at someone close to you. "Tell me, Maria, what's wrong with her?" He had already read the nurse's name on the name tag. What you see is nothing. It will heal in a couple of weeks. Your wife has a spinal injury. The doctors are deciding what to do right now, and most importantly, she needs to recover. That's the most important thing right now. I don't think that makes the guy feel good. How's that? The spine. Why didn't the doctor say anything about it? What did it all mean? Is Mary an invalid now? Tell me, can she be helped or will she be disabled now? Mark asked hopefully, but clearly he had not heard what he wanted to hear. No one can tell you yet. She's having a repeat MRSA today. Our chief neurosurgeon is coming. We called him back from vacation. He'll make the final diagnosis and deal with your wife's treatment. But she'll probably need several surgeries on her spine. I can tell you that for sure. She paused for a moment and continued. You will have to be patient. She'll take a long time to recover. I understand. Thank you for your candor. The main thing is that she's alive, and we'll manage the rest. God willing, Maria said quietly. I'll leave you alone for 5 minutes, then I'll take you back. Don't move without me. I will. Thank you again. Maria went out, and Mark was left sitting in the chair beside Mary, trying to figure out what to do now and what would happen next. He took his wife by the hand and began to talk to her. My darling, happy birthday. Today is such a day. You have to wake up, you have to. I love you very much, and I cannot live without you. You know that very well. We'll get through this. Just wake up and tell me you love me. Everything else will be all right. He stopped talking and looked up. I hope so. Suddenly, he felt his wife squeeze his fingers. It was at that moment that Maria walked in. Maria? She squeezed my hand. Mark said excitedly. Are you sure? The nurse was surprised. You may have imagined it because you wanted very much. At that moment, they both heard a quiet sound that Mary made. Maria quickly rushed out of the room. A minute later, 3 doctors and 2 nurses were already there. The boy was taken back to his room and asked to wait patiently. It was the longest half hour of his life. He felt as if his heart was beating so loudly that it could be heard, even in the hallway. Dmitri Anatolievich came in. You were right. Your presence worked. She came to her senses. The doctor saw that Mark wanted to ask something, but he raised his hand and stopped him. Wait with the questions. Let me go first. Your wife has a serious spinal injury. We're taking her for an MRI in a couple of hours. Our neurosurgeon will be here, and we'll decide what to do next. But I'll tell you frankly, the situation is very complicated. The doctor was silent, and the guy was trying to cope with the excitement to ask the main question. Tell me, just honestly, is she going to walk? I don't know. That's if it's honest. Let's wait for the results of all the tests. Then I'll tell you what to prepare for. He sat down on the edge of the bed and looked intently at Mark. Now, answer me. Honestly, do you love your wife? Are you willing to fight for her and with her? This is a very important point. I love my wife, and I will be with her no matter what verdict you come up with. Mark said confidently. I believe you. Your wife is lucky. Dmitri Anatolievich patted him on the shoulder. Hold on, it will not be easy. The doctor went out, and the boy was left alone with his thoughts. Difficulties had never frightened him, but now he was not afraid of them. He was afraid of losing his closest and dearest person. That fear was cramping his whole body, building up again and again. For a moment he even felt as if he were suffocating. Never in his life had he been as frightened as he was now. He had to pull himself together. I can't let Marisha see me like this. She would immediately figure me out. On the contrary, I need to pull myself together and show her that I believe in her. I believe that she can handle it, because I will always be there for her. I need to calm down and wait for the neurosurgeon's report. Maybe it's not as bad as they say, but the reality was scarier than verbal fantasy. In the evening in the room came Maria. Her expression was very tense. She stood by the door and looked at Mark. "Speak up, for God's sake. Don't be silent. It's worse than that," he asked. "I have bad news. Your wife is paralyzed in her lower extremities. Her spinal cord nerve endings are hit in 6 places. She'll need a very complicated operation, but no one will give you any guarantees," Maria informed him. She fell silent and lowered her head. "It is highly probable that your spouse will never walk again." If he had been hit on the head with something heavy now, the effect would have been less than what he had heard. Tears flowed from the man's eyes. He wasn't even expecting it himself. The last time he had cried was at the orphanage, when once again he had a fight over his beloved. But now it hurt so much that he just couldn't not cry. Mark felt like a wounded animal, cornered. The next day he was allowed to visit his wife. He tuned in and gathered his thoughts to somehow cheer her up, but nothing worked. Mary always read a guy's mood by his eyes and facial expressions, and they clearly gave away his state of mind. But he couldn't not go to her. The nurse wheeled Mark into the room and left them alone. Mary looked at her husband with tear-filled eyes. She already knew everything. "Hi, baby girl." The guy began and stammered. He really didn't know what was appropriate or inappropriate to say or ask right now. "Hi," Mary said very quietly and turned away. He pulled up to the bed, took his spouse by the hand. "Hey, what are you doing? We're together. We'll definitely make it." He tried to cheer his spouse up, but he didn't really believe his own words either. "Do you really think you can handle this?" Mary questioned, testing, looking at her husband. "Of course. Pretty sure," Mark replied. "You know, once upon a time I heard that expression. If a man wants to live, medicine is powerless. You want to live, you're not going to leave me, are you?" Mary smiled sadly and looked away again. "You know," she said somewhere to the ceiling, "it would be right for you to divorce me. I don't want to torture you. I don't want you to see how bad I feel. I don't want you to see how bad I feel. And I don't want anything at all. Honey, you're talking outright nonsense. I'm not going to divorce you. It's not even up for discussion." That's number 1. 2. "We have enough money to make your life comfortable," Mark said, hesitating, not knowing how informed Mary was about her condition and immediate prospects. "But if you suddenly have to be in a wheelchair for a while, yes, I'll be in that wheelchair for the rest of my life now. And don't pretend you weren't told that. You know very well that I hate being pitied. I don't need your pity or sympathy. I need your love, but you can't fully love a cripple and not try to convince me otherwise." Mary was indignant. Mark even took offense. "You mean to tell me that if I were you, you'd leave me and divorce me?" Mary turned and looked point blank at her husband. "Of course not." "Then why do you think I'm such a bastard?" she thought for a moment. "Because men are different," was the only thing Mary could think of. "Who was it that told you such nonsense? You mean men can't really love, can't woo and care? All men are traitors." Mark was angry. "That's not what I meant to say. It's just that men have certain needs, and they rarely stay faithful to one woman for long periods of time. So come on, you're not going to speak for all men." "Yes, it's understandable that it won't be the same as before." "So what? We'll try something different. And the baby? What about the baby? There's surrogacy you can adopt. It's a solvable issue too. So you're willing to continue to be with me despite my problems?" Tears flowed from Mary's eyes. "Of course, silly. I don't understand how you could think I would betray you at all. And remember, together we can make it work." A week later, she had her first surgery. The results were not what the doctors had planned. It was decided to do another one in 2 weeks. Then another one. Within a year, she underwent 6 operations. The result was, she regained sensitivity in her legs. She could even move them a little, but there was no complete recovery and no prognosis for it either. During her last checkup with a neurosurgeon, she was found to have a tumor on her spine, and that was the last straw for her. I don't want any more surgery. I've been living in hospitals for over a year. I'm sick of it. I want to go home. But you have to be examined and figure out what kind of tumor it is. The doctor objected. Do you hear me? I don't want anything else. I want to go home. Apparently a higher power has decided it's time for me to go there. That's why I'm having one problem after another. So that's the way it has to be. That's it. This conversation is over, summed up the girl. She gathered her strength and uttered, Take me home today, please. Have you finished your examination? Yes, I want to go home. Sure, I'll be at your place in an hour. During the time Mary was in the hospital, her husband built a house and furnished it so that she would be as comfortable as possible in it. Mary knew nothing of this. It was a surprise. So when Mark picked up his spouse and drove her in another direction, she was very surprised. Honey, where are we going? Home, of course. Is it just me, or are you going in the wrong direction? Mary asked. Do you have any patients? Mark smiled. Where from? Never had any, replied Mary, and smiled back. During this year, she had calmed down a little and gotten used to her new position. She was almost the same, except she couldn't walk. Sometimes she moved around with the help of a walker, but not for long because her legs got tired quickly. They drove up to the gate, which began to open automatically. Mary looked at her husband in surprise, but said nothing. The car drove into a courtyard that contained a large house, a maid's house, and a small garden. A pool could be seen in the distance, and next to it was a gazebo. The house was single-story but large. Mark helped his wife out of the car, put her in the stroller, and took her on a tour of their new home together. Look, here we have the big living room. Here we have the big living room. Here we have the kitchen. There are the toilets. And next to the bathroom, Mark told her. This is our bedroom next door and the guest bedroom. And what's that door? Mary pointed to the door. That's your office. I thought you might want to continue your creativity. You'll be comfortable in it, Mark replied. The study was indeed set up for Mary. You are so good. Thank you so much. Yes, I definitely want to work, Mary smiled. They walked out of the office. What's in there? Is there a maid's room in there? He noticed Mary's disgruntled look. Wait, you don't get mad or nervous. It's going to be an au pair. You're going to be working when you're busy with the house. And like any working person, you're going to be tired. That's why I've decided we're going to have an au pair. I don't see anything wrong with that, Mark explained. Okay, only you can. I'll pick her myself, Mary reluctantly agreed. How old is she? She asked. 52, Mark laughed. You what? You know God takes care of you. I don't need any outsiders around here, Mary replied. What Mary didn't know was that Mark hadn't just chosen an au pair. He had found a woman with medical training who had experience in caring for the disabled and strictly forbade the au pair from mentioning that she was a doctor. Life began to flow in a new way. Mark drove to the office, Mary worked from home, and then took care of all the housework. Marianne was liked. Sometimes they could spend hours just chatting in the living room over a cup of tea. Mary told Anne her life, beginning when she entered the orphanage. But don't you remember your mother never wanted to be found and find out why she did what she did? Anne asked. I wanted to, replied Mary. I really wanted to. And then abruptly changed her mind. Why? What am I going to tell her? That I've hated her all my life, that she's a traitor and you can't do that to children. What good would that do? My life won't change. Well, it will. I see your point. I probably wouldn't want her in your place either. Let that act be on her conscience. You know, I'm not a very religious person, but for some reason I believe that there's something out there, a higher court or something like that. And everybody will get what there's something like that. And everybody will get what they deserve. Definitely. So day after day passed after Mary returned to her new home. 6 months passed. One morning she woke up and felt very ill. Mary called out to Anne. "Shall we call a doctor?" she suggested. "What's the point of that?" "They've already done everything they can," Mary replied. "I'm sorry, but you shouldn't have wanted to examine your tumor. Maybe it's benign and could have just been removed," said Anne. "I'm tired of these surgeries and procedures and rehab. I want to live at home for however long I have left." "I understand you," said Anne sadly, who had seen doomed people more than once in her life. After a week, Mary's arms began to fail, and her legs finally stopped working. Patient became despondent. She stayed in her room all day, refused to eat, and stopped working altogether. Mark couldn't bear to watch his wife suffer and began staying late at work more and more often. He attributed it to a backlog of business, but the girl was not stupid and understood the real reason perfectly well. Anne looked at the young mistress with pain. She knew she had to fight, but she could see that she had to fight, but she could see that she had dropped her hands and wasn't even trying to do anything. Any attempts to get Mary to talk or just to communicate were going nowhere. One day, Anne was returning from shopping. She took a cab to the house and saw a man in his 60s outside the gate. He was trying to peek over the fence. Anne became alarmed. This is an elite village, and strangers do not walk here. So she looked sternly at the man and asked, "What do you want?" "Excuse me, do you live here?" "I work here. Who do you want?" "I want Mary. She lives here." Anne was surprised. "This is where she lives." "I'm sorry. Why do you need her?" "How long have you worked for them?" "Can we talk?" "It won't take a minute to tell you." Anne looked the man over from head to toe. He was an intelligent-looking man, and the least likely to resemble a criminal in spirit. Intuitively, Anne decided that he could be trusted. At least listen to him for sure. "All right, let's go inside. The landlady is resting anyway and won't come out. Mary is ill. Didn't you know that?" "No, I didn't." "All right, we'll talk inside." They went into the kitchen. The man waited patiently while Anne put out the groceries and was silent. "Would you like some coffee?" "Yes, I wouldn't say no." The woman made them coffee and sat down opposite the man. "What is so important and urgent you want to tell me? What's your name, by the way?" "My name is Andrew." "Nice to meet you." "And I'm Anne." "So what do you want, Andrew? Why do you want our hostess?" "She has no time for guests now, frankly." "I am Mary's father," said the guest frankly and directly. Anne almost dropped her cup of coffee from her hands. "Father, where were you when your daughter was in an orphanage, when she was suffering so much, when she needed a family member? Where—" Wait. Don't attack me. I found out about her existence 2 months ago. How is that? I'll tell you everything if you'll be patient, and then you can decide whether I'm to blame or not." "All right. Just keep your voice down, please. I dated Mary's mother many years ago. I loved her very much, but she chose someone else. I didn't have the money she wanted, so she turned me down. I, of course, was very upset and worried, and then I decided to leave town to get over her as soon as possible. It so happened that I was abroad, earned money, returned to the country, but not to my hometown, but to Moscow. I got a job in one of the clinics. I didn't say I was a doctor. I have a lot of rehabilitation experience. Moreover, I have European experience. That is why they took me without any questions. And 2 months ago, my sister, who stayed in my hometown, called me and informed me that Mary's mother, Irina Solomatino, was looking for me. I was very surprised. We hadn't talked to her once since the day she chased me away. But my sister said that she tearfully asked to get in touch with her. I took a leave of absence and went. He suddenly changed his face and looked toward the window, hiding the tears in his eyes. Then he continued. She had cancer. She was dying and wanted to have time to tell me about her daughter. I was in shock, to be honest. But when she told me what she had done to her, I was ready to kill her. I asked her, "Why didn't you find me?" "Then you didn't give the baby to me if you didn't want it." "And what did she say?" Anne asked her question. She felt very sorry for the man. She could see that he was genuinely worried about his daughter. She said she hadn't even thought about it, but as she was dying, she decided to repent to me. She told me what orphanage, what year Mary was taken to, said she had the same last name, and her patronymic was mine. And thank you for that, and advised me to find her, to tell her that she was sorry for what she had done and apologized for her broken life. He paused again, though I honestly don't know how such a thing could be forgiven. "Yeah, it's a sad story," Anne agreed with him. "What will you do?" "Will you tell Mary the truth now?" she asked. Of course, that's what I sought her out for. There is no fault of mine with my daughter. I knew nothing of her existence. I think she is an adult and will understand that. "Do you think she will be happy to see me?" the man asked. "I don't know, honestly. She doesn't want to see anyone at all right now. You haven't told me what's wrong with her." Anne told Andrew everything she knew about what had happened. Andrew changed his face a couple of times. He resented the doctor's actions, asked questions. When Anne finished the story, he sighed heavily and asked, "Can I see her?" "Andrew, I think she needs to be prepared somehow." At that moment, the bell rang from Mary's room. Anne rushed into the room. "Mary, what?" she shouted frightenedly. "Anne, call a doctor. I don't feel well at all." And then I decided to take advantage of the situation. "You know, I broke our agreement. I'm sorry. My brother came to visit me, and he's a doctor. Can I call him in first?" she said. "I don't care." "Call him," the man agreed. Andrew walked into Mary's room. This wasn't how he had imagined his meeting with her, but now the situation was such that he didn't have to choose. He walked over to the bed and looked at his only child, who was actually dying. His heart clenched in pain, but now he had to pull himself together and try to do something to help her. "Tell me, where does it hurt?" "Everywhere." He began to examine the girl, and by her reaction, he could clearly identify the problem areas. "How long have you been like this?" "I've been like this for about 2 weeks." "Okay, can you move your arms?" "I can." "Do it, please." Mary moved her hands. "Can you lift them up?" "I'll try." Mary lifted her hands up, but immediately dropped them helplessly onto the bed. Her hands went numb. "Is that why you can't hold them up?" "Yes, yes." "What about your legs? You can't feel them at all?" "It was like that right after the accident." Anne tensed up. Suddenly Mary would pay attention and ask how he knew. "Mary, I was the one who told about the accident. I'm sorry." "It's all right, Anne. It's a little secret." She turned to her father and said, "At first I didn't feel it. Then after several operations I even tried to walk. And then they found a tumor in the 6th department of the spine, and my legs every day stopped working. Now I can barely control them anymore." Andrew looked at Anne, then at his daughter and asked, "So you were able to walk after the operations? Did I get that right?" "Yes, that's right. Slowly, with difficulty, but I could." "May I see your back?" "Yes, of course." Anne helped her mistress turn on her side, but Andrew asked her to lie on her stomach. He spent about 20 minutes examining his daughter's back, pressing somewhere, checking the sensitivity. He looked at the tumor on her lower back and suddenly gave out, "I can help you. You will walk if you trust me and have patience." Anne almost fell over in surprise. Mary turned sharply on her side. "You see, you can do it yourself without Anne's help," she said. "Listen to me very carefully. You need a good course of massage, special exercises, some medication, and a carload of patience. And I promise you, you will walk." "Excuse me, what's your name?" Mary asked. "Yeah, yes," he answered calmly. "And I thought it was Wizard," she said with obvious sneer. The doctors made it clear to me that I have no chance of walking, and there's practically no chance of survival either. Why are you mocking me, giving me false hope?" said Mary. "I don't understand. I wasn't mocking you in any way. I take responsibility for my words." "You can read reviews about me on the website of the Moscow clinic where I work," he replied, mentioning the name of the clinic. The girl looked at this unfamiliar man in surprise and decided whether to believe him or not. "So as not to be unsubstantiated, I will do something now, and you will see what happens." "Trust me," said Andrew. "Go ahead," Mary offered with a challenge. Andrew leaned over and pressed something under Mary's knee. She twitched her leg, laughed, and suddenly caught herself thinking that she hadn't felt her ankle in a long time, even though the doctors had tickled it repeatedly. "How did you do that?" "It doesn't matter." "Do you believe me at all now?" He smiled. A little Mary smiled back. She liked the man. There was some incredible warmth coming from him, even from his hand. "Anne," Andrew out of the room, Mary reported. "Did you really tell her?" Anne clarified. "Do you think I could lie to my own daughter? I don't." "This is the first time I've seen you," Andrews replied. "I understand you. I understand you. I, too, am untrusting, gullible," he smiled. "I'll be there by 9 tomorrow. Warn Mary, please. I need to get some medicine and some things for a massage." "Yes, all right. We'll expect you tomorrow," replied Anne gratefully. "And thank you for giving her hope." "It's very important," she continued. "Come on. She's my daughter, and I will do everything in my power to help her get back to normal," he assured her. "It is my duty." He left, and the maid returned to Mary's room. "Do you think you will be able to help me?" "I, for some reason, want to believe him," Mary said. "You know, I think if you believe it yourself and help in any way you can, the two of you will definitely succeed. I'm going to try my best. I have hope." "Just let's not say anything to my husband yet," Anne replied. "Okay, I don't want him to find out before he does." Mary agreed. The next day, Andrew arrived at 9 o'clock, as promised. After coffee, they began with a massage. Then, a very small set of exercises. Despite the girls' desire to make quick progress, Andrew strictly forbade them to do anything on their own without his knowledge. "Mary, remember, we want results, not speed. You are not ready for a serious workout and will not be ready for it for a long time. You need to do everything gradually and correctly. Otherwise, it may have the opposite effect. You and I don't need that, do we?" he advised. "No, of course not," Mary agreed. "Then do as I tell you." "And to exactly that extent, you promise not to do it yourself," prescribed Andrew. "I promise," Mary smiled. "It's not like I'm my own enemy." "Fine, then. I have a question. We can only study with you on the weekend on Saturday. My husband is home on Sunday. It's his only day off, and I don't want to tell him about you yet." "All right," agreed Andrew. "Then we'll do it this way. On Sunday, you will study under Anne. I'll write her a lesson plan and ask her to supervise. I think you'll be able to keep your husband busy for an hour." "Yes, of course. He likes to sleep in at lunchtime. He gets very tired. On Sunday he clings to the whole week," Mary replied. So they did. 6 days a week, massage and exercise with Andrew, and on Sunday, exercise under Anne's supervision. There were no results yet, but it had only been 2 weeks. Although Mary felt the strength in her arms and legs was beginning to show and her mood was improving, she was frustrated by her relationship with Mark. He was increasingly staying late at work, and tonight he'd spent the night there altogether. Mary cried all night. She and Mark understood, of course, but she felt sorry for herself. It turned out that his promise to be there for her had failed. Her husband had been gone for a while, and that was a shame. Maybe he had someone else. A thought popped into Mary's head, and that made her even more upset. The next day, when Andrew came in, Mary was in no mood at all, and therefore in no mood to study. The father immediately sensed his daughter's mood and quietly asked, "Is there something hurting in your heart?" said Mary sadly. The father took it literally and frightenedly asked, "Where exactly does it hurt? Have you had heart problems before?" "No, but it's not like that, and that's not why it hurts. I think my husband has taken a mistress, although I understand him, of course." Unexpectedly to herself, Mary frankly admitted. The surprise was that Mary had never trusted anyone and had never said anything about her life, and especially about her relationship with her husband. "That's ridiculous. What makes you think that? He didn't come home tonight. This has never happened before." "Mary, that doesn't prove at all that he has a mistress. He's just tired. You have to understand, it's not just hard for you, it's hard for him. And that's normal. Do not judge him and do not be angry. I think things will get better over time." "Are you just reassuring me, or do you really think so?" Mary asked. "I'm absolutely sure of that." "Do you have any relatives?" the girl asked. No. "Do you have children?" "Yes, a daughter. But I only found that out recently, and I'm also tormented by it, because I'm just afraid to admit to her that I'm her father." "Why, did you leave her once?" "No. Did you? I would never abandon my child. It's just that her mother didn't tell me she was pregnant, and she broke things off with me. And I left town to get over her. And then, many years later, I found out that it turns out I had a grown daughter." "So tell her that." "Do you know where she lives?" the girl asked. "Yes, but I am afraid," he answered. "I think you should not think so," she said. "I am sure of it. I didn't know my father. I don't even know who he was. But if he knocked on my door right now and said, 'Mary, hello, I'm your daddy,' I'd be jumping to the ceiling," she added. "Roger that," the man replied, and got up from his chair, heading for the door. The man opened the door, walked into the room, and said, "Mary, hello, I'm your daddy." Mary was numb, looking at the visitor. They looked at each other in silence. Each was thinking his own thoughts at that moment, and no one dared to break the silence. He waited for at least some reaction from his daughter, and she couldn't believe what she was hearing. "You, my daddy?" Tears flowed from her eyes in a river. "How could that be?" she asked. He walked over to the bed, moved the chair, and sat down next to her to retell his life story. When he finished the story, Mary simply said, "Can I give you a hug?" "Of course. I've been wanting to do that for a long time. You have no idea how glad I am to find you. I wanted to find my mother, but then I changed my mind. But that I had such a wonderful father I couldn't even dream of. Thank you for coming. Thank you for listening and accepting. I was very worried about how you were reacting. I don't forgive betrayal. You didn't betray me. You didn't know about me." She comforted her father. They talked for a long time more. Each recounted his life before this meeting. Mary listened with pride to her father's account of his successes and accomplishments, and her father listened with tears in his eyes to his daughter's life story. They had much to talk about, and no one interrupted them. They didn't miss class that day for a good reason. The father said that they would make up for everything except for the massage, which they could not tolerate, so they had to lie down and be patient. Mary diligently followed her father's recommendations. Now she had no doubt that she would recover, for she was being treated by the best doctor who was more interested in her recovery than all the doctors put together. From then on, the sessions took much longer. Father and daughter could not talk enough. They even called each other in the evenings and had long conversations on the phone or Skype. Mary promised to tell her husband later all about the wonderful meeting so that her father could move in with them. It would be more convenient and easier for everyone. But for now, Mary didn't know how to tell Mark. By the time he got home, Mary was already asleep. All those classes were exhausting, and at 10:00 p.m., she usually fell asleep. Her father said it was very well because sleep is the best medicine for her body. It went on like that for almost a month. Today, Mark stayed up late at work again. He didn't feel like going home at all. He even stopped a few times on the way and just stared at nothing, stalling for time. He knew his wife had been tired for the past few weeks and went to bed early. He pulled up to the house around 11. 0. The lights were only on in the living room, so everyone was asleep. Anne tried to go to bed right after Mary, so she could get up early to do her chores. He walked into the living room and heard Mary talking to someone. It was very strange why she was awake, and who could be visiting them this late, Mark wondered. He moved closer to the door and listened. "I'm very grateful to you," Mary was saying to someone. "I don't know how I would have done without you." "Did you come into my life at such a good time?" the man on Skype interjected. They were talking on video, Mark guessed. "What time are you coming in tomorrow?" the usual. Mary asked. "No, honey. There's something else to buy for you tomorrow. I'll be there later. Maybe by 10 or 11:30 I'll call you or Ann when I pull up. Now go to bed and rest. It's getting late. Good night. I hug you. I love you," the man replied. "Good night," said Mary calmly. Mark got a chill on his skin at those words. "And I love you until tomorrow," the man replied. Mark was furious. So his wife had met at the hospital, probably with some man. And now she's having an affair behind his back. So maybe she's pretending to be sick to avoid sleeping with her husband, and she's even aware of it. Alone. But he's a gullible idiot. He went to the bar in the living room and poured himself some wine. Mark drank very rarely, only light drinks. So a couple of glasses of wine were more than enough for him to relax. Thoughts were jumbled in his head. He honestly did not undead on the pillow, but that couldn't be. She can't lift her arms up. Her arms were failing her, so she lied to me after all. So it was a hoax or a blatant lie. He was angry, very angry, and couldn't think of anything better to do. He decided not to go to work tomorrow, or rather to pretend that he went, and then come back after 10 that he went, and then come back after 10 unexpectedly home. "I wonder what she'll tell me when I catch them red-handed," gloated Mark. In the morning, as usual, he left for work at 8, warned Anne that it would be late tonight and there would be no cooking for him. Anne agreed, nodded, and went into the kitchen. Mark looked angrily at the nurse. After all, she was aware of everything too, and she was laughing. Mark must have been winding himself up and getting even angrier. Mary woke up at 9 o'clock. She ate a light breakfast with Anne and waited for Andrew. Anne was kind of mysterious today. "Anne, are you all right?" Mary inquired. "Yes, I'm fine." "Why do you all right?" "Yes, I'm fine." "Why do you ask?" and blushed slightly. "I don't know." "You don't seem your usual self today," Mary asked. Anne said at first, and then she sat down in her chair and suddenly confessed, "I really like your father. I get terribly shy and nervous when I see him." "So that's great." "What's wrong with that?" Mary rejoiced. "What if he has someone else? I don't want to meddle in someone else's family." "I'll find out," Anne winked. "Come on, how could you?" Women's solidarity, Mary smiled again. She was in a good mood. The result of the lessons with her father was evident. Mary could already stand on her feet and even take a few steps with the help of her walkers. Yes, running. Still a long way off, and unlikely to be possible, but at least something. And my arms have almost stopped hurting. Andrew called. "Mary? Hi! I'll be there in 10 minutes. Hi, we're waiting for you," Mary blurted out. She looked at Anne, no face on her, and smiled. "Who are you?" Father wondered. "Well, me and my limbs," Mary blurted out. "Oh, good." Father walked into the living room, said hello to Anne, and kissed her. Mary took her into her room to study, and was making dinner and didn't even hear Mark come in. "Anne, is Mary in the room?" She heard her master's voice. Out of surprise, she dropped her plate on the floor, and it shattered in pieces. "Mark, why are you here?" Anne asked, the first thing that came into her head. And I can't come home in the afternoon, Mark wondered. Are you hiding something from me? No, I was just asking. App was almost dead. She didn't know what she should do to warn her mistress. She saw that Mark was very angry and would not sort it out. Who's there and what? Mark asked. And Andrew is just giving Mary a massage. And there's no telling what a jealous husband might see in there. What a nightmare. Anne thought, we have to warn them somehow. Maybe you'd like some coffee, Anne suggested. Are you kidding me? Do you think I came home for you to make me coffee? I said, where is my wife? Is she in her room, or has she run out on a date already? Mark said, anger and even rage engulfing him. He had been used to defending his, and including his Mary, since childhood. Oh, what are you talking about? What date, Mary? At home, replied Anne. She went after him to at least help in case anything happened, but Mark heard nothing anymore. He ripped open the doorknob and saw a picture that made him very sick. Mark grabbed his opponent by the shoulder, pulled him sharply toward him, and punched him in the face. Andrew clearly wasn't ready for that and collapsed on the bed from the impact. Mark wanted to pick him up and hit him again, but Mary jumped up from the bed and, covering herself with the covers, shouted, Don't touch him. That's my father, Nark. Vyacheslav was like having a bucket of cold water poured over his head. Who is that? He asked. That's my father, Mary repeated. What are you doing? What father? Where did he come from? Mark asked question after question. If you'll calm down, I'll explain everything to you, said Mary. It was only now that Mark noticed that Mary herself was standing on the floor. You're walking just a little bit. And if you didn't cripple my father, I'll walk more, she added. I don't understand anything, Mark muttered barely audibly, realizing his foolishness. Papa, and have some coffee, Mary suggested. We need to talk, she continued, leaning toward her father. There's nothing wrong with you. I'm fine, my teeth seem to be in place. Andrew smiled. You didn't tell me your spouse was so jealous? Asked Mark. I'm sorry. I didn't think that would happen myself, Mary replied. Andrew and Anne left the room. Mary invited her husband to sit down next to her and retold him the story of how she met her father and that he was a doctor and was helping her recover. Why didn't you tell me about this right away? Wondered Mark. I wanted to surprise you for one thing. And second of all, I didn't know exactly what kind of result Dad and I would get. I didn't want to give false hope, Mary explained. And if I had beaten him harder, did you think about that? Inquired Mark. How on earth did I know that you had something on your mind? And how did you even know about it? Objected Mary. I heard you confessing your love to someone last night when I came in, Mark replied. The conversation dragged on, and Mary realized that she was wrong, too. She had been wrong to keep the news about her father from her husband. Mark in turn apologized for his jealous action. Please forgive me guiltily, he said. I'm an idiot. But I have an excuse. I'm in love, Mark smiled in conclusion. You will forgive me. Of course, only my dad needs to apologize too, of course. What is his father's name? Andrew. All right, let's go apologize. Well, let's go. That's a big word. As we drove, Mary smiled. She got in the stroller and, thank goodness, took her spouse into the living room. Andrew and Anne were sitting on the couch, drinking coffee. At the sight of her hosts, Anne immediately jumped up. Sit. It's all right, Mark said, and turned to his father-in-law. Andrew, forgive me for God's sake. I didn't mean for our acquaintance to happen this way. But I didn't know anything about you, and I couldn't even imagine that you could be Mary's father. Come on, it's all right. It'll heal before the wedding, smiled his father. It'll heal before the wedding, smiled his father. In-law, before the wedding, wondered Mary. Until whose wedding? Before mine, of course. You're not going to get a divorce because of me, I hope, smiled Andrew. I've never been married, by the way. How interesting, Mary smiled enigmatically. But you will invite us, I hope. Of course, if you promise not to fight, said Father, and everyone laughed. Will you invite me? Asked Anne sadly and quietly. And you will be invited? Smiled Andrew and changed the subject. Mary, we have a massage to continue. We haven't worked with you yet today. Yes, we have, of course. I'll get the word out and go back to the room. In the meantime, you have coffee, tea. Mark left for work and Mary and her father went back to class. After all the procedures, Andrew left. Mary decided in the evening to talk to her husband about having her father stay at their house. She came into the kitchen, which smelled really good. What are you cooking that's so magical? I'm just drooling. But Anne stood with her back to the hostess and didn't turn around. Anne said, Your favorite meat. Mary heard Anne's voice tremble. Turn to me, please, she asked. I'm sorry, I can't. Don't make me drive across the kitchen to you. Anne turned and Mary saw that she was crying. What are you? What's wrong? Anne asked. And you don't understand. Your father is going to get married, Mary replied. And for a moment I thought he liked me too. So I think your tears are premature. There's no need to get upset prematurely. And when to get upset, when he brings me the invitation, and everything will be fine. Somehow, I think he was joking at all, said Mary, trying to reassure Anne. They sat down next to each other to enjoy a glass of wine when the doorbell rang. Who could it be? Anne wondered. Will you look in, please? I'm not expecting anyone, Mary asked. Anne went to the door and saw Andrew on the threshold with a huge bouquet of roses. Dear Anne, I beg you to be my wife, he said, giving her flowers in a small box with a ring. Anne took the box and asked, Is this for me? Tears streamed down her cheeks. The ring was very beautiful. Anne took it out of the box and put it on her finger. Does that mean you agree? Andrew asked. Of course, Anne replied. Only I have one request to you. May I? Reluctantly, Andrew asked. Of course. Let's have the wedding when Mary can walk. It's a couple of months, literally. Oh, no problem at all. Sure, we'll wait. 2 months later, Mary was already walking around the house on her own. Not fast, but no walker, just a stick. Andrew moved into his daughter's house and now spent even more time with his future wife. One evening, they sat in the gazebo and talked. At that time, Mark was concerned with one question. How was it that the doctors had given up on her and Andrew had brought her back to life? You see, Mark, the doctors thought Mary had a tumor on her spine, and it wasn't a tumor, it was a hernia. If it wasn't advanced, it could have been removed with chiropractic care. If it was, it would have been surgically removed. It's a common medical error. It's just that Mary had problems with her musculoskeletal system, that they came to this conclusion. It happens. What would we do without you? Said Mark, if it wasn't for you. All right, stop thanking me. I did what I had to do. It's my daughter to whom I am very guilty, though not guilty. The important thing is that things worked out in tandem for us. I thought it would take more time, but Mary did a great job. She did it much faster. Mark, I have a suggestion for you. I know it needs to be discussed with our women, but I wanted to talk to you first. I'm intrigued. What's wrong? Inquired Mark. No, nothing happened. I just wanted to offer to build a bigger house. I'll sell my apartment in Moscow. That's more than enough to expand. Mary can't do without Anne's help anyway, and I'll be around for backup. And there's not much room for us in this house. I don't mind. Let's just ask the women. The men returned to the house. Anne and Mary were sitting on the couch in the living room, discussing something emotionally. It turned out they were talking about an upcoming event, a wedding. Anne didn't want anything big, and Mary persuaded her to give in. I really want you to have a mega-class event. My dad's got me on my feet. You're an indispensable person to me in general. Is there anything I can do for you in return? Mark resented. Why is it just you? I'm in this too, he said. And Andrew Stefanovich interjected. I think it's better to give in. Mary won't back down anyway. All right, agreed Anne. Agreed, Anne, agreed. And we wanted to discuss something with you too, the father began. And we can't do it without you. Let's solve our problem now, Mary said cheerfully. She's changed a lot lately. Not just lived. She was all glowing from the inside out. Your dad suggested building one big house for all of us. A room each, a couple of guest bedrooms, a kitchen, a living room, your office. What do you say? Turned to mock Mary. With a playfully offended look at her husband and father, she asked, Is something wrong? Mark tensed up. It seemed to him that his wife didn't like the idea. Not like that, Mary replied. When did you want to start building? She asked. Anytime tomorrow, Mark answered immediately, if there were no objections. All right, build. Will you rebuild again in 8 months? Mary said calmly, and winked at Anne, who already knew everything. I don't understand why rebuild again. Mark genuinely wondered. But how why? Because there isn't a nursery among the rooms you listed. Mary smiled. Mark looked at his wife and then at his father-in-law, uncomprehendingly, and shrugged. Do you understand anything, Andrew? He asked. I think I do. In 8 months I'll be a grandfather, if not a father, my father-in-law shouted cheerfully. Mark had tears in his eyes. It's true, that's for sure. That's for sure. There can be no mistake. Right, he repeated. I went to the doctor yesterday, Mary smiled. Mark ran up and hugged his wife. Well, that's super news. You are so good. Oh, wait. Are you allowed to give birth by yourself? Mark was frightened, thinking that he would have to have a C-section. But it's not a problem at all. Andrew intervened. Mark was in a state of shock and could not believe what was happening. Until 6 months ago, it seemed to him that the happy family life was over and there would never be anything good again. But with the arrival of his father-in-law, everything changed abruptly. So abruptly that he did not have time to absorb the information. A week later, the newlyweds got married. The wedding was played in the same restaurant where their younger in-laws were. They didn't invite many guests. They celebrated in a small circle. And the parents, took care of all the expenses of the event and gave the newlyweds a trip as a wedding gift. Anne, who had never been anywhere in her life, almost fell off her chair. Why? It's so expensive, I guess. You have already organized and paid for everything. I'm embarrassed, really. Have a rest. You still have a grandson or granddaughter to nurse, laughed the guy. While the newlyweds were away, they designed their new big house, but would not start construction without the newlyweds' approval. Upon their return, the project was approved and started. The house was finished just in time for the birth of the baby. But they decided to move into the new house when the event happened. On the due date, Mary gave birth to a daughter. Her name was Victoria.